I want you to imagine being 17 years old.
Okay.
You're fresh out of a Baltimore finishing school, and suddenly you find yourself committing a lethal act of violence against a soldier.
Wow. Right in your own home, too.
Exactly, right in your own home. Now, in a time of war, under martial law, the outcome of that scenario is usually, pretty swift and brutal.
Yeah, you'd expect a military tribunal or a firing squad.
Right. But instead, you are placed under house arrest. And you somehow use the resulting proximity to charm the enemy officers guarding you.
Which is wild.
It is. You charm them into voluntarily handing over highly classified state secrets.
It sounds like a fabricated thriller.
It really does.
But the historical records of Maria Isabella Boyd, or Belle Boyd as she's known, along with her own highly fictionalized memoirs, they paint this picture of a teenager who weaponized the very fact that nobody took her seriously.
So today on The Deep Dive, we are analyzing the mechanics of how she became one of the American Civil War's most notorious Confederate spies.
Yeah, it's a fascinating topic.
And before we jump in, because we are diving into sources dealing with the American Civil War.
Right, touching on the Confederacy, the Union, the institution of slavery.
Exactly. It's worth noting up front for you, the listener, that our mission today is entirely objective. We are looking at this purely as a historical case study of espionage.
We definitely aren't here to endorse any faction's ideology or actions,
Right, not at all. We are simply dissecting the historical events and the raw mechanics of how this teenage operative functioned based on the documented texts.
And that objective lens is crucial here, especially because our primary source material is this fascinating collision of hard military records and Boyd's own 2-volume memoirs.
Which she published way later in life.
Yeah, exactly. And she was a very unreliable narrator of her own story.
Oh, for sure.
Prone to, extreme embellishment. But filtering the verified military intelligence through her dramatic self-mythologizing, that's what actually reveals her true tradecraft.
I love that. So the journey from this privileged finishing school student to a high-level intelligence operative, it didn't start with some formal recruitment.
No, not at all.
It started with a spontaneous, violent escalation. This was on July 4th, 1861, in her hometown of Martinsburg, Virginia.
Yeah, up until that summer, her life was largely, what you would expect for someone of her background.
Right.
But when Union forces occupied Martinsburg, the war literally crossed her threshold.
Literally.
According to her 1866 account, Union soldiers got a tip that Confederate flags were hidden in her family's home.
So a search party arrives.
They arrive, but they don't just, toss the rooms. They hoisted a Union flag over her house.
Wow.
And during that confrontation, one of the soldiers directed some pretty intense profanity at her mother.
Right, and the cursing just enrages Boyd.
Completely.
She pulls out a pistol, shoots the man, and he dies a few hours later.
Yeah.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because the immediate aftermath is where the conventional logic of military occupation just completely breaks down.
It really does.
She kills a Union soldier, yet a board of inquiry exonerates her of murder.
Which is crazy to think about.
Right. They place her under strict guard, posting sentries around her house. And that creates this intense, enforced familiarity between her and the occupying forces.
And she recognizes the strategic value of that familiarity immediately, right away.
Yeah.
She takes the officers assigned to monitor her, specifically a man named Captain Daniel Kiley, and she begins gathering information from them through casual, flirtatious conversation.
I mean, I struggle to buy the whole Victorian fragility argument entirely here.
How so?
Well, I understand that 1860 society viewed women as delicate, right? Intellectually incapable of the complexities of war.
Right, that was the standard view.
But she had just shot a man dead.
Yeah, she did.
At what point does military self-preservation override societal manners? Weren't these Union commanders more afraid of turning her into a local martyr than they were of violating Victorian etiquette by punishing her?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, that is the exact tension the Union Tribunal faced.
Okay.
Executing a teenage girl from a prominent local family that would have ignited a massive insurgency in Martinsburg.
Oh, that makes sense.
So they made a pragmatic calculation. Exonerate her to keep the peace, but isolate her under house arrest.
Great.
What they failed to calculate was the psychological vulnerability of their own officers.
Of course.
The men guarding her simply could not reconcile the girl they were talking to with the violent act she had just committed.
They just couldn't put the two together.
Exactly. They categorized the shooting as this, emotional, hysterical outburst in defense of her mother.
Rather than a calculated lethal threat.
Right.
It reminds me of modern social engineering.
Oh, totally.
It's like a hacker getting caught breaching a secure network. And instead of going to federal prison, they manipulate the cybersecurity team into voluntarily handing over their administrative passwords.
That is a perfect analogy.
Yeah.
She identified a massive vulnerability in the human firewall, and she just exploited it.
But gathering the intelligence is only the first step.
Right.
We need to look at the physical tradecraft of how she transmitted this data because she was heavily monitored.
Oh, very heavily.
Yeah.
And the methods she used were remarkably sophisticated for an amateur.
Yeah.
In her memoirs, she actually notes receiving, quote, some very remarkable effusions, some withered flowers, and a great deal of important information from Captain Kiley.
Okay, we have to break down what a 19th century dead drop disguised as courtship actually looks like.
It's pretty clever.
Because a bouquet of withered flowers seems romantic, sure, but practically speaking, how is she pulling actionable troop movements out of that?
Well, in the mid-19th century, the language of flowers was a very real, very complex social code used for courtship.
Right, like different flowers meant different things.
Exactly. So it provided the perfect camouflage for exchanging physical notes.
Ah, I see.
You could easily slip, like tightly rolled, ciphered messages inside the stems or the binding of a floral arrangement.
That is brilliant.
It was. But as you pointed out, extracting the data from the Union officers was only half the equation.
Yeah, she still has to send it out.
Transmitting that data to the Confederate Army required a courier who could bypass those sentries surrounding her home.
And this brings us to a woman named Eliza Hopewell,
Yes.
who was enslaved by the Boyd family. Boyd utilized her to physically carry these stolen military secrets through town.
Right.
The intelligence was hidden inside a hollowed-out watch case that Eliza carried. But, this raises a major question about Boyd's awareness for me.
What do you mean?
Well, she was caught on her very first attempt at spying and threatened with the death penalty.
Yeah, she was.
Yet she kept going, using an enslaved person to absorb an immense amount of physical risk.
It's incredibly dark.
Was this calculated military strategy at this point, or just a teenager playing an incredibly dangerous game without fully grasping the consequences?
Honestly, it was likely a dangerous mix of both. But what's fascinating here is how it highlights a profound structural irony of the era.
Okay.
We discussed how Boyd used her gender to become invisible as a threat to Union officers, right?
Right.
But with Eliza Hopewell, Boyd exploited a completely different kind of systemic invisibility.
The invisibility of being enslaved.
Yes. Union sentries standing guard, they simply did not perceive a black enslaved woman as a potential intelligence asset.
Or a courier for high-level tactical data.
Exactly. They looked right past her.
Wow. So the Confederate espionage network was entirely reliant on the forced risk of the very people they were fighting to keep subjugated.
Yes, exactly that. The structural racism of the 19th century created blind spots so massive that entire intelligence operations were run right through them.
That is wild.
Union guards were looking for male couriers on horseback, not an enslaved domestic worker carrying a pocket watch.
Right. And the transition from these early, somewhat clumsy smuggling operations to her becoming a crucial tactical asset happens incredibly fast.
It's a very rapid escalation.
Because by mid-May 1862, her operations are directly altering the battlefield in the Shenandoah Valley.
Yeah, the events in Front Royal, Virginia, they really showcase how she learned to weaponize that proximity.
Okay, set the scene for us.
So Union General James Shields was holding a staff meeting in the parlor of the Strickler House Hotel.
And she is hiding in the closet of that exact room.
Yeah, right in the closet.
The sources indicate she had actually enlarged a knothole in the wooden door to eavesdrop.
Which is so brazen.
You have to wonder about the physical reality of that. Enlarging a knothole quietly enough not to alert a room full of military brass, that requires immense patience and nerve.
Oh, absolutely.
And through that hole, she intercepts the kind of intelligence that wins campaigns. General Shields has been ordered to move his forces east, leaving Front Royal vulnerable.
And that night ride she takes proves she wasn't just gathering intel anymore. She was learning how to weaponize it.
Because having information is useless if you can't deliver it.
Right. The exact right moment. So she secures forged papers, mounts a horse, and rides straight through the Union lines in the pitch dark.
But wait, how does a teenager secure convincing forged travel papers in an occupied town in 1862?
Well, the bureaucratic chaos of the Civil War made forgery surprisingly easy if you had the right connections.
Really?
Yeah, passes were often just handwritten notes signed by local provost marshals.
Oh, I see.
So Boyd's network had likely, stolen blank passes or learned to forge the signatures of the occupying commanders.
That's so clever.
She uses these to bluff her way past the armed pickets, reaches Colonel Turner Ashby to deliver the news, and sneaks all the way back into town before morning.
Wow. And that successful delivery sets the stage for the battle on May 23rd, 1862.
The Battle of Front Royal.
Right. The Confederates advance on Front Royal. The town is an active combat zone, and Belle Boyd sprints out of her house, running through literal crossfire to greet Stonewall Jackson's men.
Her skirts are literally getting pierced by bullets.
It's like a movie scene.
It really is.
She finds a Confederate officer and delivers this real-time update. She says, quote, "The Yankee force is very small. Tell him to charge right down and he will catch them all."
And Jackson acts on that intelligence immediately.
Right.
He orders the charge, and the Confederates take the town.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. She wasn't just a scout. She was essentially a human flash drive operating on an encrypted network that the Union didn't even know existed.
The network of societal blind spots.
Exactly. Like today, commanders rely on asymmetrical data couriers or, encrypted digital drops to get real-time battlefield data.
Right.
She provided that exact tactical advantage by running through a firefight in a dress.
And the military impact of civilian intelligence delivered with that kind of precision.
Why?
I mean, it cannot be overstated.
No.
Stonewall Jackson actually wrote her a personal note of gratitude.
Really?
Yeah, stating, quote, "I thank you for myself and for the Army for the immense service that you have rendered your country today." He appointed her as an honorary captain and aide-de-camp, and she was awarded the Southern Cross of Honor.
That is a massive validation. But operating as an asymmetrical data courier has a shelf life.
Oh, definitely.
You cannot dictate orders to generals in the middle of a battle and maintain your cover.
No, you really can't.
The press catches wind of her. They start calling her the Siren of the Shenandoah and the Rebel Joan of Arc.
And that level of notoriety paints a massive target on her back.
Right.
It forces the Union to completely shift their counterintelligence strategy. They stop treating her as just a local nuisance.
They bring in the big guns.
Exactly. They bring in the newly formed Secret Service under the famed detective Alan Pinkerton.
Oh, wow. Pinkerton himself.
Yeah. And Pinkerton assigns 3 operatives specifically to build a case against her.
Think about the digital trails we leave today, right? Pinkerton's detectives didn't have cell phone pings or surveillance cameras.
No, not at all.
How are they tracking a teenage girl across state lines in the 1860s?
They had to rely on the meticulous analog work of building a surveillance state.
Like what?
Well, Pinkerton's men intercepted her mail, analyzing the handwriting and the delivery networks.
Okay.
They shadowed her movements physically, and most importantly, they relied on human intelligence flipping assets within her own circle.
Ah, betrayal.
Exactly. Now, she managed to evade arrest 6 different times by utilizing safe houses and sympathetic locals.
6 times?
Yeah. But in July 1862, her luck finally runs out. A lover betrays her.
Ouch.
He feeds Pinkerton the exact time and place to apprehend her.
So they brought her directly to the old Capitol Prison in Washington, D.C.
Right.
But the timeline of her incarceration is baffling to me. She is only held there for a month.
Yeah.
In August 1862, she is released and exchanged at Fort Monroe. She goes right back to espionage, gets arrested again in June 1863, and is released once more after contracting typhoid fever.
It's pretty unbelievable.
Why is the Union military justice system functioning like a revolving door for their most wanted spy? If she were a male soldier caught out of uniform transmitting troop movements, he would be hanged without hesitation.
Absolutely. But this raises an important question. The Union was paralyzed by a massive institutional dilemma regarding female prisoners of war.
Okay.
The military justice system was entirely built around the concept of male combatants. They had zero legal or social precedent for prosecuting female spies.
So they literally didn't know what to do with her.
Right. Do you put a teenage girl on trial for treason and execute her?
I guess in the eyes of Victorian society, executing a young woman, even a proven enemy combatant who caused immense Union casualties, would have been framed as completely barbaric.
Exactly. It would have deeply damaged the Union's moral high ground and turned her into this huge international martyr.
So her gender, which initially served as her camouflage to gather the intelligence, ultimately serves as her shield against the consequences of gathering it.
It's a perfect paradox.
She slips right through the cracks of a legal system that structurally could not account for her existence.
But as the war grinds to a close, that shield begins to crack.
Right, the Confederacy starts to fall.
The Confederate infrastructure collapses, and Belle Boyd is faced with the most difficult pivot of her career, transitioning from surviving bullets to surviving peacetime.
And this post-war chapter is arguably more surprising than her espionage career.
It really takes a turn.
In March 1864, she attempts to flee to England, but she isn't traveling on a standard passenger ship. She is on a blockade runner called the Greyhound.
Yeah. And the Union naval blockade was this massive fleet designed to strangle the Southern economy by preventing any ships from entering or leaving Confederate ports.
Right.
Blockade runners were fast, sleek ships built for speed and stealth. But the Greyhound is spotted and pursued by a Union warship.
And after a tense chase, the Union forces board the vessel.
They do?
And the Union naval officer who boards the ship and officially captures her is a man named Samuel Wild Hardinge. And in a twist that sounds too absurd for fiction, she ends up marrying him.
It's incredible. She marries the very officer who arrested her.
You can't write that.
You can't. Hardinge is actually court-martialed and dismissed from the Union Navy for his association with her.
Wow.
They wed in England and have a daughter, Grace. But the marriage is brief. Hardinge dies shortly after in 1866.
Which leaves the most famous Confederate spy, widowed in a foreign country, with a young child and no income.
A terrible situation.
How does she survive? She does something brilliant. She monetizes her own notoriety.
Yeah.
She becomes a stage actress.
She returns to the United States and begins performing under the stage name Nina Benjamin.
Wow.
Her personal life remains pretty turbulent, though. She marries a former British Army officer named John Swainston Hammond in New Orleans in 1869.
Ironically, a man who had fought for the Union Army.
Right. They have 4 children, though they tragically lose their first son as an infant. She later divorces Hammond in 1884.
Which was an incredibly rare and stigmatized move for a woman at that time.
Oh, highly stigmatized. And then she marries her third husband, Nathaniel Ruhai.
But it is her professional evolution that is so fascinating to me. She transitions from playing fictional characters on stage to playing herself.
Yes.
She launches a theatrical lecture tour across the United States, standing on stage and recounting her days as a Civil War spy to paying audiences.
And she publishes Belle Boyd in Camp and Prison, the 2-volume memoir we discussed at the start of this deep dive.
So what does this all mean?
Well, this is where we have to look critically at the discrepancies in her memoir.
Right, because we know she embellished.
Heavily. Historians note that she vastly exaggerated her influence in certain battles. She fabricated dialogue to make herself sound more heroic.
Of course.
And she smoothed over the darker realities of her tradecraft, including the forced involvement of enslaved people.
She wrote the book not as a historical record, but as a survival mechanism.
Exactly.
It is the 19th century equivalent of a true crime podcaster or a reality television star, recognizing that their public persona is their most valuable financial asset.
That's a great way to put it.
She didn't let journalists or Union generals write her legacy. She wrote it herself, packaged it, and sold tickets to it.
She understood that history is often dictated by whoever tells the most compelling story.
Yeah.
By taking control of her narrative, she became the architect of her own lasting myth. She ensured she would not be remembered as a disgraced, captured operative, but as the legendary Siren of the Shenandoah.
And that myth-making sustained her until the very end of her life. She died of a heart attack in June 1900 at the age of 56 while touring in Wisconsin Dells, Wisconsin.
The details of her funeral provide a profound, almost poetic conclusion to her chaotic life.
They really do.
The woman who had spent her formative years actively working to dismantle the United States was buried in the Spring Grove Cemetery in Wisconsin.
Right.
And the men who served as her pallbearers were members of the Grand Army of the Republic.
Union veterans.
Yes.
The very soldiers she had gathered intelligence against carried her casket to her grave.
It's just astonishing.
And for years, her resting place was marked by a simple stone, paid for by a Union veteran who signed it only as a comrade.
Wow.
The inscription read, quote, Belle Boyd, Confederate spy, born in Virginia, died in Wisconsin.
And her carefully constructed persona lived on far beyond that grave.
Oh, absolutely.
The theatrical version of her life inspired novels, a silent film series called The Girl Spy, and she even appears as a master spy in modern strategy video games like Civilization 4.
Her manipulation of narrative was just as successful as her manipulation of Union officers.
Without a doubt.
So think about the historical narratives you consume today. How much of what we accept as historical fact is simply the raw data of events, and how much of it is shaped by the people bold enough to tell their own stories the loudest?
That is the big question.
The legacy of Belle Boyd demonstrates that manipulating the historical record after the fact can be just as enduring as the physical actions taken during the war.
It really forces us to question the reliability of the myths we celebrate. Are we admiring the reality of the person or simply the effectiveness of their public relations?
Which leaves us with a lingering thought to explore on your own. Think back to that 17-year-old girl standing in a parlor with a smoking pistol, acting like a hacker, talking her way out of a server breach.
Right.
If she deliberately fictionalized her own memoirs, if she turned her survival into a literal stage play, are we remembering the real Maria Isabella Boyd today?
Or are we just remembering the brilliant, untouchable character she had to invent in order to survive a man's war? A fascinating puzzle to untangle.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.